everyone. My name is Kruttika Chari. I am 21 years old and today I will be speaking on something which is very important to me and that I myself have had a lot of personal experience with. But before I get into that, I just want to thank the organizing committee on TED. I think on behalf of all the speakers, I can say that we're very grateful to be given this opportunity, so thank you. What is mental health? Okay, so when I say that someone is in good physical health, the first thing that comes to someone's mind is that they're physically fit, is that they lack any sickness or that they lack any injury. But little of us, we fail to realize that mental health is actually a very big important part of it. Mental health is just as important as physical health. The WHO defines mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Mental health is essentially our emotional and our psychological well-being. Mental health is important for a lot of reasons. It helps us in our daily aspects in our lives. It helps us cope with the daily stresses of daily stresses of our lives, whether this be big things to say the death of a loved one, or little things to getting a bad grade on a test, or to say having a bad hair day. So unfortunately, not all of us have good mental health. A majority of people are struck with mental illness. So my topic today will be mental health, mental illness, and the social stigma that surrounds it. Before I go into mental illness, I'd like to share some statistics with you all. In 2012, India accounted for the highest estimated number of suicides in the world. Over 1 lakh of people in India commit suicide every year. The WHO predicts that by the year 2020, 20% of India's population will suffer from some form of mental illness. When I first heard these facts, I was extremely shocked. I knew that mental illness was prevalent in India, but I didn't know that it was this rampant. And the reason that a lot of people don't know this, and the reason for this is because mental illness, not only in India, but in the world, is surrounded by social stigma. And we tend to treat those with mental illness with shame, or we are almost scared of them. We tend to treat them with ignorance. And collectively, as a society, that needs to stop. So I've been using the word stigma a lot, so I'm going to explain what exactly that is. Stigma is nothing but a mark of disgrace. It's something that society causes. It causes the person who's experiencing the stigma to feel shame and to feel embarrassment. And when I was researching on stigma, I saw something that really stuck with me. The quote said, "You'd never say it's just cancer, get over it." And this was something that I found really powerful because it compared the physical ailment of something as intense as cancer with something like mental health. And it really helped me to realize that mental health is just as important as physical health. A large reason that the stigma about mental illness is prevalent in India is because most people are unaware of the facts of mental illness. And there are a lot of common misconceptions and myths about it. Before I jump into these facts, I would like to share something with you all. As I said before, I've had a lot of personal experience with mental illness. And I've not really talked about this much before. When I was 16, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. And for a very long time, I thought that it was my fault and that there was something wrong with me. And a lot of this was due to the fact that I myself wasn't aware of mental health, and I myself had a stigma towards myself. And it took me a very long time to accept that I had this disorder and to seek treatment for it, and let alone speak about it on a public platform like I am today, right now. It took me almost 4 to 5 years to do this. And so something that really changed my view on this Someone once said to me, Kruttika, look at it as if you have diabetes. Sorry. They said, if you had diabetes, what would you do? You would go to the doctor, you would pay regular visits, you would check your insulin levels, you would check your blood sugar. So just like that, with mental illness, you need to treat it just the same way. You need to, instead of visiting the doctor, you need to visit the psychiatrist. Instead of taking tablets for your insulin, you need to take tablets for your brain. So just the way that you would treat a physical illness, you need to treat a mental illness. That really helped me to change my perspective, and that made me be able to stand here today and to tell everyone that I have a mental disorder and I am not ashamed of it. It is time to stand up to stigma and to speak about mental health. So the ways in which we could challenge this stigma, I'm going to speak about certain ways in which collectively as a society we can challenge the stigma. A common misconception is that mental illness only affects a few people. This is not true. In fact, 1 in every 5 people are affected with some sort of mental disorder. And it's a lot more common and prevalent than I thought it was. Another very common misconception is that mental illness is caused by personal weakness. As I said, I myself thought that there was something wrong with me and that it was my fault. But the fact is that mental illness is caused by genetic factors, by biological factors, by social factors, and by environmental factors. In fact, when I was first diagnosed, I found out that I was born with low levels of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter which affects mood disorders and anxiety disorders. So that was one of the reasons for my anxiety and my obsessive compulsive disorder. Another common misconception is that mental illness is something that someone can just get over. People used to tell me, you know what, it's a phase. Get over it. You will get over it. It's just a phase. But the fact of the matter is that mental illness needs to be treated just as any other physical ailment does. So like I said, it's time to stand up to the stigma and to talk about mental health as we would talk about anything else. So now certain preventions that we as a society can take. The first is to learn and share the facts about mental illness. Awareness is the first step in learning about concepts such as this, especially concepts which are not socially talked about as much. The next is to interact with those who have had personal experiences with mental illness. By doing so, you can gain a better perspective of mental illness and the different perspectives on it. The next is to offer the same support to people whether they are physically or mentally unwell. I cannot stress this enough, but we need to start comparing mental illness to something like a physical illness. And very important, do not label or judge people with mental illnesses. You need to treat them with the same respect and dignity as you would treat anyone else. And probably the most important point, and if there's anything that I want anyone to take away from my speech, it is that if you have had mental illness, please speak about it openly, because the more hidden mental illness remains, the more stigma surrounds it and the more people believe that it's shameful and that it's nothing to talk about. So if you have mental illness, please remember that it is not your fault and you have nothing to be ashamed of. And I'd like to conclude with a quote that really struck a chord with me, which is by Bill Clinton, which I think adequately sums up my speech, which is that mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, but stigma and bias shame us all. Thank you.